Valerie Geller is president of Geller Media International, a broadcast consulting firm working with news, talk, information, and personality programming for radio and television and podcasting and any other platform that comes along throughout the world. Valerie coaches talent, leads creating powerful communicators, workshops, and seminars, and has helped people at more than 500 stations in 31 countries. I didn't know there were 31 countries. Develop and grow their audiences by training communicators to work more effectively. Valerie is the author of 4 books about broadcasting, including her most recent, which we have right here, Beyond Powerful Radio, A Communicator's Guide to the Internet Age, and it is available on Audible. Yeah. And everyone should get it there because it's for free, you said?
It's free on Audible. If you're
Unbelievable.
A member of Audible, yeah.
Please welcome Valerie Geller.
Great. Thank you.
I should say, too, that we're going to do a special little giveaway of this copy of Valerie's book. So after this session, if you want to drop a business card on the table in the back where you picked up your card, you will get a chance to win Valerie's famous
Somehow it's not as good
book.
as George Clooney and jumping out of an airplane and all that, but we try.
He's just staring at you, looking you in the eye. He's not even going anywhere. It's just, I hate him. So Valerie, let's talk about the key principles that you focus on. You focus on 4 principles, and I just want to unpack them if we can. The first one is, how can I communicate more powerfully? Can you talk about that?
Well, it's interesting because it's great to come on this stage at this point in the conference, because everything that Todd was talking about and everybody that's sort of come before, it's about authenticity and it's about making something matter. So we're all in the story business, every single one of you. If you work in a field where you're trying to get, keep, and grow audiences, the crack cocaine of that is storytelling and stories. And so it's all about how to communicate your story powerfully. And before anything goes on air or goes in a podcast, always ask the question, how is it relevant? How does it matter to a listener or a viewer? And of course, the real secret of life is, how does it matter to you? If you don't care, how the hell are you going to make an audience care? You're not a communicator, you're an actor playing the part of somebody trying to get a message across. If it's real, if it's authentic, there is such power in that, and it's magical. Radio, audio is magical. You're in somebody's head. You're not alone when you hit that black button or you put those ear pods in your ears. All of a sudden, you're entertained, informed, inspired, persuaded, but most important, you're connected. And I saw something exciting yesterday in a really terrible day in Los Angeles. If you were following the story, if you were in LA yesterday, a professor at UCLA was shot and killed by a student, and then the student turned the gun on himself. And people heard about it in different ways. Social media, they heard about it on radio. KNX did an amazing job of covering it. But people then wanted to talk about it. So it hit Twitter. And then I went into a Starbucks and people were actually talking with one another verbally about this, strangers. And then back on social media to see if they had identified the professor yet and what had happened. If students at UCLA were safe. And everybody in LA knew somebody who was either a student, a teacher, or worked at UCLA. And it was amazing how social media and actual broadcast media came together to hold up a mirror and reflect life on a breaking story.
So how does all that social media tapestry influence what happens over the air or at the mic?
It's something Anya talked about, which is anything you do in a podcast, if you use radio as a driver, it all works together. It works like this. If you do a podcast and you're just doing it for the online or the digital audience, it's your content and your brand, and mostly it's just relevant content. And it doesn't matter to the audience, and you've heard this 1,000 times. If they get it through the fillings in their teeth, they don't care. They just want to connect with a story and with a human being.
So how do you tell a story without making it all about the storyteller?
There's a model that I teach, and a lot of my life is sitting in rooms with on-air personalities and podcasters, and most of them are really, really good and really, really talented. And my job isn't to, although I do work with a lot of beginners and newbies and trained newspaper people to go on air, it's really about how tall a tree can you become? How can we polish you like a diamond and get you to be a more powerful storyteller? There are 3 rules about powerful communication. Tell the truth, make it matter, and never be boring. And if it's boring, you've lost your audience. So how do you make it not boring? So the model is focus. What is it you want to say? And every single speaker up here has talked about the same thing today. Health and safety, people care. Emotion, people care. Money and power and saving money, people care. And feeling connected or making a difference in life, people care. So if you can look at your topic and say, how is that affecting those things that people really care about? Focus your topic. Engage. What's in it for the listener or the viewer? What do they get? Answer the question, why should I listen to this? Or hold it up to the so what mirror. So what? How can you say something differently or more uniquely by putting your DNA in it? The number one way to go personal without going private, the private is boring, but the personal is universal, is to use the word you instead of we, me, I, us, or our. So instead of I have tickets to give away, or we'll be talking with Mark Ramsey coming up next, it becomes you have a chance to win tickets. Or in a moment, you will meet Mark Ramsey. The minute you make it you make everything about the listener. Imagine your audience, each person, one at a time, has a bucket. What are you putting into that bucket? As far as storytelling, are you making a movie and putting that listener in that movie? You know, if you're talking about a fire, your audience should taste the smoke in the back of their throat. The imagination is so powerful. Are you using visual language? It's not enough to say it's a nice sunset. Go with tangerine sky. You know, make a picture. Listen to song lyrics. Look at great writers. Read poetry. Write poetry. Learn to write visually. Always speak as though you were talking to a blind man. And when you do that, your work's going to get better. The minute you do that, it engages. Once upon a time, in a far-off land, there was a princess and a monster, and then one day. The minute the audience leans in and goes, and then what happened? You own them. You've got them hooked. You know? The other secret of telling a story is interested is interesting. If you're interested in telling it, and you care about it, and you're invested in it, and you're interested, you'll find a way to make it interesting.
We know what engagement means on the digital front, basically, but you know, this is not a word historically used in the audio space. What does engagement mean today when it comes to audio, given that people have all these personal and direct ways to engage with each other?
This is such a great question, Mark. Okay, Confucius, like thousands of years ago, wrote, "Tell me, I'll forget. Show me, I may remember. But involve me, and I'll understand." And engagement means what's in it for the audience? How can they engage? Are you talking to me if I'm a listener or I'm a viewer? How does this affect my life? Why should I care and get involved in this? And engagement means you're getting somebody's attention. They're paying attention. I will never hire an on-air personality or work with a podcaster if I wouldn't take a 5-hour car journey with that person and have a great time. Because at the end of the day, you're sitting alone with this person. Do you want to hang out with them? I mean, Jesse Thorne, I'd drive to Mexico with him, you know. It's like, you know, is this person original? Are they a good listener? Are they fun to be with? Because, by the way, this isn't school. And I work a lot with the BBC, and when I was working with the BBC, everything was worthy. It has to be worthy. And even now when I work with public radio shows, you know, is this worthy? And, you know, and you have to inform and entertain and inspire and connect people. And if it doesn't do all those things, it's just not going to work, and it can't be boring. And if you're bored, it's going to be boring.
I was struck by the data that Anya showed, that the different colored lines that started high and dropped fast, reflecting engagement, essentially.
So a lot of my job is teaching people how to get the top line and not have to go through the bottom
well,
line
or to
yeah.
affect the arc of the top of
right.
one of the lines, one of the other.
Instant engagement.
That's what my question is,
Right.
which is how do you sustain that engagement over a period of time? Let's assume we're dealing with a story or a block that's longer than 3 or 4 or 5 seconds. How do you keep that engagement as high as possible.
Are there characters that we can care about? Is it a story that has good and evil? Is it Shakespearean? Is it David and Goliath? Do you have a theme for your story? Are you introducing the audience to characters they'd never meet in a million years, except now you're taking them on a journey and introducing them to these people? Is there a beginning, a middle, and an end? Is there an arc? Is this a talkable topic? Is this a story that if you didn't have to produce a piece for broadcast or podcast, would you talk about it off air as easily as you would talk about it on air? Is this something that happened to you? Why do you care about it? What's your personal connection to this topic or story? Do you know people that this has happened to? Why was it interesting to you? You know, is it something that you've overheard? You know, some of the best stories, I mean, I hear reporters talk about this all the time. They overhear stuff. They notice things. You know, all artists observe life and they filter what they see through their own unique creative process, and then they put it out for other people. And if you gave a set of facts, and in fact, when I was training storytelling in Africa, and this story is in the book, I worked with a group of journalists, and they had been trained to tell a set of facts exactly the same way. And one of the set of facts we worked with was there had been a women's prison. And at this women's prison, one of the prisoners had gotten pregnant and had given birth to a baby girl. And there had never been a baby born at the prison before. There were actually no men around, so they didn't even know how she got pregnant. And she was in jail for having killed her father, and she was in jail for life. So the issue was what to do with the baby. And we sent the reporters out with this set of facts, and their assignment was come back and tell the story with your DNA in such a way that only you could tell the story this way, but yet keeping to the same set of facts. Mm-hmm. The first guy in Swahili told the story. This was Nairobi. The last Immaculate Conception was 2,000 years ago. The latest was yesterday at Nairobi jail. The next woman, she was fantastic. I had very little expectation. She was very quiet. One of those people, do you know when somebody makes themselves small in a room and you just sort of don't notice them? She was one of those people, very, very quiet, very small in the room. And then she told the story from the perspective of the baby. I will never know my grandfather. My mother killed him. I may never see the light of day, for I am born in Nairobi jail. I mean, it was so good. That's storytelling. Make it yours. Use your life to tell the story. Use what you know. It's what we know from writing. It's what we know from photography. It's what we know from experiencing life. That we document and validate our lives through our stories, our culture, our history, who we are as human beings, holding up a mirror reflecting life. Radio isn't radio, it's life. It's life and people and stories. And how do you make the world better and leave your campsite better than you found it? And understand complex issues. How can you disseminate something that's complicated into a way that's more easily accessible for a mass audience, or even an educated audience that doesn't understand? That's really the challenge. And then humor, of course. If you can have fun doing it, or if you make a listener laugh, you will own them. If you give somebody joy in any way, they will come back to you.
What does it mean to tell a story when you have, by orders from above, only a handful of seconds of mic time?
Well, you had mentioned it right at the beginning with the Ernest Hemingway example, and Dot Cannon, who's sitting in the audience, who does a podcast, also reminded me of the Ernest Hemingway story. In 6 words, his goal was tell a story and sell something. And in 6 words, for sale, baby shoes, never worn. 5 seconds, maybe? 4?
So if I'm an air talent on a station and I have 6 seconds, what kind of advice do you give me?
Distill. Who's the who, and is that important? Start your story with what happened rather than who said it, okay? What's in it for the listener, or what happened and why I need to listen to this? Start with that. Write your piece and then edit out and remove any unnecessary words. And this goes for Twitter, it goes for on-air storytelling. Take out all superfluous verbiage, clean it up. Mm-hmm. Use every word, make every word matter, and also make a picture. make sure there's at least one visual in everything you're talking about. Men are really, really visual, much more so than women. And in fact, when you look at the MRI, the functional MRI of the male brain, when the male subject was given either a picture or enough verbal cues so he could imagine something, the learning centers in the male brain lit up yellow. With women, they liked the pictures. Men actually needed them. Women needed the emotive. And again, this is about 80%. It's not everybody, but it's most of the audience. So if we know, we've always known men were visual sexually, but it turns out they're visual with everything. So for example, Mark, if I want you to buy milk on the way home, and I say to you, Mark, can you stop off and get a quart of milk? I'm going to have better luck if I say, imagine the refrigerator, imagine the top shelf, no milk. Or if I really want Mark to bring milk home.
Why is this about me?
I don't know, because you're like the lucky guy sitting here. It's Mark Ramsey. But the bottom line is, if I actually took my camera and texted him a photo of our top shelf of our fridge, the chances are he would say, okay, no milk, I got to get milk. And so the more you can do that's visual, the more powerful it is. Use visual language. It's very magical and it's very, very powerful.
You said to me that you thought that radio specifically was losing its best and brightest to podcasting. Can you explain that?
It breaks my heart. And again, this has been talked about throughout the day. When you had gatekeepers who, if it didn't sound like what they had heard before, they didn't want to take a risk. Now, in defense of program directors at radio stations, and I work with hundreds of program directors in radio stations all over the planet, and they run racehorses. And if those horses can't win the race, they lose their jobs. And if they don't believe that this is a champion racehorse, they can't put their money on it. So they're risk averse right now. Very, very, very few radio station program directors are willing to roll the dice and take a risk. Creative process is risk. And Dean Capello, who's not here today, when I was in Paris, we spent some time talking, and he talks about you got to fail 13 times before it succeeds. And he used Freakonomics as an example of a show that just didn't work for a really long time. I go back to 60 Minutes. That's a show that didn't work for 10 years and then became #1 for the next 30.
Seinfeld,
Yeah,
same thing.
you got it. They only did 4 episodes of Seinfeld because they weren't sure it was going to work. So you need to have room to fail. And program directors are risk adverse now, and it's such a tight situation, even in public radio. And that's why the podcast is a canvas where you can work it out. It's the garage band. It's where you can get your Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours somewhere else. And it's where you can refine and distill your creative project or process or show and get it to the point. You can narrowcast online and broadcast on air.
I saved my favorite question for last. I'm going to ask it anyway, even though we talked about maybe it wasn't a good question. What can talent learn from Donald Trump?
Oh, God. All right. I knew this was coming. The same thing we could learn from P.T. Barnum, that life is a show. And if you make noise and get their attention, and then hit something that people care about, hit something that matters to them, then you will have their attention. And I think that we need to make sure that what we do in radio is not plastic, not fake, and not acting. And you've heard today from a lot of people who are being very successful because it's authentic, it's real. People talking about things they really care about, tweeting about things that matter, doing charity that really can make a difference or change things. So if you look at P.T. Barnum, the new incarnation of that is Trump. He knows how to wow a room and make a lot of noise and get them in a circus tent. And that's a thing that radio could do more of in a real way, not we have a sponsor, so now we have to create a fake thing to get everybody interested because we've got this pile of money and we have to allocate it in a way that's going to work for the sponsor. So it's the other way. Do you know what I mean?
I do.
Yeah.
So if you haven't read Valerie Geller's book yet, what are you waiting for? Rush out now, get it from Amazon.